This is our textual analysis of our production apparition. The medium shot of the legs dangling in the water connotes a dislocation. This is a connotation of the deceased having no emotions. These characters are slowly dying or have already died. The shot then cuts their upper bodies out, including their faces, which connotes their identities have been lost. This would entice the audience to watch the whole film and leave them with enigma as to who the characters were killed by and who they are. The low-key lighting is a convention of psychological horrors and highlights death and evil presence. The handheld movement of the camera connotes disorientation and uncertainty, linking to the unknown reason for why these characters died. All the faces of the drowned characters are in a medium close-up, connoting all the emotions and feelings are slowly draining away. The camera movement is once again quite unstable, further connoting the disorientation and confusion. This brings visceral pleasure to the audience as it would feel more realistic and as though they were in the water. The medium shot of the lake characters tilts up in slow motion, adding attention to small details. Similarly, it focuses on characters' emotional reaction to the event. The slowness of the movement connotes that all the characters are slowly but surely slipping away. The slow motion will encourage an emotional response within the audience and increase their heart rates. The tilt stops on a long shot of a black figure staring down on the deceased. We can see the reflections of the lifeless characters are upside down, connoting that they are in another dimension or that their lives have been turned upside down by this event. This also brings entertainment to the audience and encourages them to watch on and try and solve the mystery of who has killed these characters. Next, there is a medium close-up of the protagonist jolting awake. The camera moves back slightly when she wakes up, shocked and scared. This connotes that her mind is unstable like the camera movement. She is not thinking clearly. The sting creates an intense atmosphere for the audience. This is followed by the diegetic sound of the protagonist breathing quickly and heavily, connoting she is alarmed. This creates a further emotional response as the audience may feel sorry for her, however they also question why she is so startled, creating enigma.
This is a medium close-up side profile. The shadow drops behind the protagonist. This reinforces the connotations throughout the opening sequence that she is being followed, either by an evil supernatural threat or by her mental illness. The side profile doesn't reveal her full face, which helps to conceal her emotions. This connotes that the protagonist's mind is being controlled by another force. She is unable to think clearly for herself. The track right again connotes that the protagonist is being followed. These connotations of the protagonist's mind being controlled will appeal to the audience. This is because they will receive the gratification of entertainment as there is a sense of involvement due to the tense atmosphere created. The next shot is a forward-facing shot that reveals her full face. The variance of side profile and the forward-facing shot connotes that the protagonist is unsure of her emotions. It also connotes that she isn't in control of her thoughts and actions. This forward-facing shot will appeal to our audience as the protagonist is looking directly at the camera, and therefore the audience will feel a personal connection with her and empathise with her situation. This idea also fulfills Maslow's needs of love and belonging, as the audience will feel as if a friendship has been created. In this shot, the protagonist briefly turns around before running away. This connotes that she has seen something mysterious and is desperate to get away. It also connotes that she is turning her back on normality. The medium close-up shot is also significant as it connotes that the threat is closing in on her. These connotations will appeal to the audience as they receive a visceral pleasure, e.g. an increased heart rate, as they feel scared and anxious for the protagonist. This is a long shot. The long distance between the camera and the protagonist connotes how she is isolated and how she is absorbed in her own thoughts. The quick track left connotes both intensity and determination in which the protagonist wants to escape. It also connotes the overwhelming fear that the protagonist is feeling. At the start of the shot, the tracking is quite shaky. This is intentional, as we believe that it connotes disorientation for the protagonist. This connotation will appeal to the audience as it provides a sense of realism, as they will see the world through the eyes of the protagonist, and therefore they will feel as if they are experiencing it all with her. At the beginning of the shot, the music gradually increases. This connotes that the illness/supernatural threat is increasing its control that it has over her. The music will appeal to the audience as it is a powerful element which taps into deep instinctive fears and therefore will create a visceral pleasure as the audience will have a physical response, e.g. think about how they would feel if this was happening to them. This shot tracks forward slightly and then zooms in. This connotes that the supernatural threat or mental illness is imposing on her and removing her from a natural state. Towards the end of the shot, the background blurs, which again connotes her lack of normality. The track forward and zoom will appeal to the audience as the camera is practically the audience's eyes, and therefore they will feel as if they are being pulled forward closer to the protagonist and therefore will feel a connection with her. This is a medium long shot. The camera is stationary, which connotes that the protagonist is in a state of shock. As well as this, the protagonist is seen to be looking around. She is surrounded by trees and nature, which subverts the connotations of unnaturalness implied through her mysterious actions. The location of a wood incorporates the genre theory and the idea of repetition and difference. The word location will appeal to the audience as it is conventional location for psychological horrors, which is the repetition. However, unlike many psychological horrors, the wood is used by the protagonist as somewhere to escape and to feel safe instead of somewhere that is scary or haunted, which is the difference. So this repetition and difference will appeal to the audience as they receive an intellectual pleasure, as they will have to think about why a stereotypical scary place has been given different connotations. This close-up connotes her intense emotions. The stationary camera again connotes that the protagonist is in a state of shock and that she is frozen with fear. The stationary camera in the last two shots will appeal to the audience as it provides them with personal identity. This is because the stationary camera connotes that, just like the camera, the protagonist's life is at a standstill. The audience will recognise the minimal movement and will be able to relate.
The big close-up of the protagonist's face at 1 minute 17 connotes how fearful she is of her surroundings as she anticipates that she is not alone. The pull of focus has connotations of her lack of mental stability, as she wasn't seeing things clearly until the camera pulled into focus and she started to see her dead friends. She has blurred the boundaries for herself between what's real and what's not. From this, the audience would receive intellectual pleasure because they would begin to question what's wrong with the girl and try to work it out before it's revealed in the film. The fast pan right of the forest connotes the increasing nervousness of the protagonist. She's eager to check that she is alone. The speed of the camera movement connotes how insecure she is feeling. Being alone in the woods is frightening her, as there is no one around her if she were to need help. You can apply the use and gratification of entertainment from this, as it's quite disorientating and therefore the audience would feel more involved in the film. The high-angle shot of the girl walking on the leaves connotes the idea that death is surrounding her. The fallen leaves are symbolic of the end of spring when new life is celebrated in nature. Therefore, the leaves on the ground have connotations that the girl is not alone and almost foreshadows the fact that her dead friends are about to appear. The fact that she snaps a twig connotes her broken mindset and instability, as well as the fact that she knows she is vulnerable, so she's trying to prove her power and control. The audience would receive emotional pleasure from this, as it would encourage them to feel scared and nervous as they will anticipate that something bad is going to happen. The big close-up of the protagonist's face from 1 minute 28 to 1 minute 44 as the handheld camera tracks left connotes how introvert the character is. She is focused purely on herself and her own situation, as the sequence is quite literally revolving around her. It also connotes that she is surrounded by her worst fears, and the big close-up highlights how nervous it's making her. Again, the audience would receive the emotional pleasure of feeling scared because of the shaky camera movement connoting nervousness, as well as the blank emotionless expression on the protagonist's face. At 1 minute 21, the orchestral score goes from fast and intense to quieter and a more gentle but sinister sound. This helps to connote the ambiguity of the threat and the loneliness she feels, being the only living victim. From this, the audience would receive entertainment, as it helps to increase the intensity of the sequence, as the quieter sound suggests something scary is about to happen. All of the edits in this part of the sequence are cuts. As they are fairly fluid and smooth, this connotes the loss of stability in the girl's mind. Her thoughts are all over the place and she's struggling to determine what's real and what's not. This would provide the audience with intellectual pleasure because they would want to figure out what's happening to the girl and know why she seems so disturbed.
This is a big close-up shot of the protagonist's face connoting her intense emotions. She stood standing still and extremely focused on the characters in front of her, connoting the shock of seeing her friends for the first time since they died. The camera also tracks left around the protagonist's face. The camera is quite shaky, which was also intentional as it connotes the disorientated thoughts going through her mind at the time. We can apply Maslow's hierarchy of needs to this shot, as the audience will gain self-actualization as they would try and figure out what she is staring at before the camera shows. This shot is also a big close-up. A beam of sunlight helps merge the two shots together. The hazy look that the ambient light creates further connotes her perplexed mind. The beam of sunlight also distinguishes the binary opposition of light versus dark. Her dark thoughts are taking over her mind, but the sunlight provides a sense of normality. Also, in society, it is common for people to say that just before you die, you will see a bright white light. This could connote that the character is almost dead on the inside and that her hallucination is an indication that she is becoming weaker and weaker. We can apply the uses and gratifications of entertainment and social interaction as the shot flowed nicely. 1 second the camera is tracking around the protagonist and the next second all the deceased characters appear. This big close-up is slightly blurred, connoting that what is happening to her is all a mystery and is still unclear, providing the audience with intellectual pleasure as they will have to guess what is to come. This is an over-the-shoulder shot, connoting that the threat is constantly watching her back and will always be around her. The long shot of the boy standing in the distance connotes how far from normality the protagonist is. The boy in the shot is standing in an aggressive way, head down and his shoulders upright, connoting that perhaps he has come back to haunt her. There could be the indication that the protagonist may have personally affected him and has come back to get revenge. The audience can receive counterculture attraction from this shot, as in real life, it would be impossible for you to see someone who has died standing right in front of you.
We can do it.
This next shot is a medium close-up of one of the deceased characters, connoting her intense emotions of what was fear. She is completely frozen as she is standing still, but you can also see this from her makeup. We use more cool tone colours such as blues and greens and purples to mimic the lack of blood flow within the characters, and because you would associate these colours with death, especially as they died from drowning. Our audience can feel emotional pleasures such as being scared, as this shot is a direct address, meaning that the audience is engaging with the character and possibly feeling scared. The long shot of the woods connotes how isolated the protagonist is. She is by herself, connoting vulnerability. The letters that make up the title all appear in a random order, connoting the uncertainty of what is to come. We didn't go for a conventional horror font as it doesn't fit with our narrative. Instead, we chose to use a simple and smart font reflecting our sophisticated narrative. We wanted our audience to gain entertainment from watching the sequence as the letters appear, as the audience will have to figure out what the letters are spelling. We hope they get excited as to what will happen next. Throughout the sequence, we used mainly low-key and ambient light as we wanted the film to be as realistic in terms of setting, but we changed some of the colours with the sequence to create more of an eerie and spooky atmosphere.
We all believe that our audience is active. We know that C2 to E, our primary audience, is stereotypically seen as unsophisticated and therefore wouldn't necessarily be an active audience. However, due to the sophisticated content in the film, because of our independent production company, the audience are forced to be active because of the many questions raised throughout the film. We can apply the uses and gratifications of entertainment and personal identity to our production. The shots of the teenagers drowning could provide a visceral pleasure of feeling sick, as it would be a traumatic experience, therefore the audience receive entertainment. Personal identity could be achieved due to the school environment and age of the characters. Some of our target audience would still be in education, therefore they would be able to relate to the concept of being at school. By applying the reception analysis to our opening sequence, our intentional dominant reading was that females are weak and victimised more than males. We show this through things such as the high-angle shot of her in the bed, connoting her vulnerability as she is being looked down upon and controlled by the antagonist. The oppositional reading for this would be that females are not always the victims and that men are targeted more than women. The negotiated reading would be that whilst women are often targeted as victims, men also experience similar things, therefore neither one is targeted more. However, although we didn't intend to, we also demonstrate things which connote the female's power, making another possible dominant reading that women are independent and strong. For example, the long shots of the female in the woods could connote her dominance over the space around her and her total comfort in the fact that she can defend herself even in a desolate location. The oppositional reading for this representation would be that females aren't strong and they rely on the strength of men in order to stay safe and protected. The negotiated reading would be that men and women are equally as independent and capable of looking after themselves, but it is dependent on the The negotiated reading would be that men and women are equally as independent and capable of looking after themselves, but it depends on the individual as to whether they rely on themselves or others. If our audience was passive, you could argue that our opening sequence adds to the culmination theory in encouraging the idea that women are weaker than men. It has become a stereotype to have a female victim in a horror film, therefore the receivers begin to believe that this ideology of female weakness is true.